What's going on, y'all? This is Logan Cohen from the Balanced Man Plan here for our viewer questions to get answered on the Wednesday night live stream. Looking forward to talking to y'all about some answers to these questions that y'all have been asking. Hey, Miss Amber, how y'all doing? Real quick, just as who I am, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified trauma professional, as well as a supervisor with the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy. I have a counseling practice in North Carolina. I am not a men's rights advocate. I am an advocate for men's mental health, though. I think it's something that is missing on a really large scale, really systematically, and is a piece of really what needs to be at the table to help turn this whole boat around. And Balanced Man Plan is a big part of that happening. Tend to work a lot with relationships, addiction, romance issues, infidelity recovery, some of the more complicated stuff that we tend to see in the mental health arena. I worked in more high acuity settings for a long time, and as a result of that, tend to pick up some more intensive practices and familiarity. So I've been doing this for a little over 15 years, and I'm looking forward to continuing on in this project with y'all. I've had a really good time doing this and answering questions for y'all and doing these videos, so I appreciate y'all supporting. So let's get going with this first question. And feel free to ask questions about the questions or do whatever else as you're hearing these. In a very wrong relationship. He is married. We have a very strong attachment. He's a good guy. We were friends first. We messed up. Yeah, I'd say. We enjoy what we have, and at the same time, he worries about my future. I want to stop the relationship, but I couldn't wait for his call, wait him to ask me to meet him. I gave him nothing to think about besides him. I love the attention he gives me. I can't let go of that. Okay, so first, I want to say just because I'm a marriage and family therapist doesn't mean that I have stock in marriage necessarily, and people always staying together. I have stock in people's health and happiness, and I believe that healthy relationships are an amazing conduit, an efficient conduit to getting there. Now, I'm also not always going to poo-poo on folks that do have experiences with infidelity. I see a lot of recovery processes happen, but here, in this situation, talking about being the other woman, so to speak, and being in a relationship with this married guy, that we have a very strong attachment. Realistically, y'all probably have a lot of chemistry, probably not an extraordinarily strong attachment as we're thinking about it. I know it's really exciting. You also spoke directly to this validation that he's giving you, and that is what you can't let go of versus him. So I would encourage you to consider what that validation means to you as a woman and how you feel with him. And I would consider what else you have going on in your own life. And maybe some depression stuff that you're running away from, or something else is going on for you. I would consider you to think a little less about this guy who's married, and if he wanted to be available to have a strong attachment with you, he would be making that happen regardless of the situation. So you take care of yourself. I encourage you to do that. What are your thoughts on separation? My husband just suggested it. Well, if they suggested it, it might be a wise idea to at least consider deeply where that is coming from with them, because if not, it's inevitably going to happen. You might want to just meet him where he's at in honoring the request for the separation and trying to take it from where it is. It seems like he's already withdrawing. I wouldn't pursue too heavily until you know a little bit more about what's going on, but time to lean into that space if you want to hold on to that. And if you don't, just let let that happen, which you might not. Who am I to judge? Hey, I would love it if you could discuss the unique trauma that adoptees experience and give us some tips on how to cope. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. I love this question. I worked in community mental health for a little over 10 years, and predominantly with kids with psychiatric illness and their families, and a lot with kids in the system and foster care systems. And working with kids who are adopted is something that I did quite frequently, and working with them with their families who they were adopted to. And those were really tricky situations because you often have families that weren't able to have a child biologically and organically, so they have some of their own hang-ups about what that meant to them and their personal identity. And then having this kid in the household that they're adopting who's been through the foster system somewhat is a really tricky situation for everybody to manage, because what that kid needs above all else is permission to be able to fantasize about their biological family and who they might be connected to. That's a very natural, human, normal thing to want to experience and to long for. And the trauma that kids often face coming into the world as adoptees is you come into the world with loss. And that a part of that tends to stay regardless of what we do. We don't have distinct memories, say even if you're adopted as an infant, we don't have really distinct memories until we become more verbal. We develop more words, like 3 or 4, and that is how the brain starts encoding long-term memories into the cerebellum, into the back of the brain here. So even kids that were adopted at birth, they don't have specific memories of these things happening, but what does get encoded is the emotional climate of what's happening around us, which would be a lot of parents being sad, a lot of caretakers not really attuning to us, and us feeling lonely and out there and abandoned. And a part of that tends to remain throughout our lives unless we do some significant work on it, or unless the kids that the families that adopted us really go out of their way to sit with a family therapist. I did this a lot in my younger years, in my 20s, and supporting the child through his fantasizing about this other family, and being able to be very selfless with this kid and not even thinking about our own hang-ups about why we couldn't have a biological child, and letting them fantasize about their family and those connections and how beautiful all these things will be, and putting names to them so they don't have to have this split loyalty inside of them. If families do that, then kids are way better set up moving forward. What are you doing here? Oh, thanks. I appreciate being with y'all and sharing the journey with you. Let's see. Can a narcissistic person change? You're going to see us talking a lot about the concepts of narcissism, what that is and what it's not. It's something that's been almost bastardized to some degree in pop psychology these days, and it really cranks up your views if you hashtag narc and narcissist and all this stuff, and use some of that verbiage. But a lot of times it's being used as a synonym for abuser, where it really, people who are abusers and are having that behavior will function from all kinds of different places, and some are treatable, some are not. If you're talking about narcissistic personality disorder that's been identified by a trained psychologist through adequate psychological testing and reliably verified, then the likelihood that that's going to change is very low. It's a pretty persistent way of being. There are some cases where I've seen folks be willing to do the work to figure out kind of how they get skewed and reorganize around it. Also with borderline personality disorder, it's almost like someone is always kind of at this angle and tries to walk around at a 45-degree angle all the time, and you almost have to teach them to kind of like crank it back, and they have to develop these patterns of learning how to walk like this, is what it kind of feels like to them, almost like someone with autism or someone that of course doesn't have a natural inclination to remorse or empathy. So it can be done. It does happen every now and again, not very likely, but a lot of times the etiology and appropriate diagnostics behind what we're seeing called narcissism these days is not narcissism. My wife was adopted. We both under birth parents 1 year after we got married. We both regretted it. That is oftentimes the story that I hear from folks that are adopted and who I've worked with. There's a client that I'm working with currently who's like a super exec corporate badass, a ton of money, ton of influence, and is a grinder. And they learned to do that largely in the foster system and kind of hustling for their worth, so to speak. And they always had this pipe dream about meeting their family, and recently got connected with them through some folks with like 23andMe or something, and they met them, and it's a mess, and in many ways they're going like, oh my gosh, I'm lucky that I was adopted, and even a really yucky adoption story, like kid really horrible, like tearjerker type stuff. Sometimes it's even hard to listen to for me when he's telling his stories. Okay, keep going through these questions here, and y'all are shooting out some great questions as well. Some advice needed if you have time. Yeah, I got time. Now's the time. My boyfriend has given me the silent treatment since June 10th. Okay. We both went on our different family vacations. Okay. He returned today and decided to text, wanting to talk on Tuesday. I have no desire to respond, but don't want to be rude. And 2 days later, got an update from her. Said he asked to exchange items. A lot of times when things start going sour in relationships, so obviously you don't need an answer to that question, right? That already happened. But just as commentary, a lot of times when things start falling apart in relationships, we see them happening. And the hardest part is considering letting go of this person. And first and foremost, a lot of times the parts of our identity that we've woven into this other person. And a lot of times folks try to avoid a conflict or a confrontation so we can avoid something happening, and oh my gosh, it's going to fall apart. If you're avoiding having a reasonable conversation at normal Tim tone volume of voice, not having drop down, drag out yelling match with each other, it's like just responding to a text. No amount of avoiding it is going to make it go away. It's going to stay there. And if we want to have some skin in the game and how it's going to play out, let's lean into that space and figure out some different ways of navigating it. We would talk about some different ways of communicating, some different ways of going about that here. And I'm continuing to look forward to being a part of the journey with y'all as you figure out relationship stuff. Relationships these days are super tough. Everything is moving very quickly and evolving relatively quickly when you look at social and cultural expectations relative to how they've always been for humans. Things are happening super rapidly these days. And it's really important to make sure that we can roll with those punches and roll with resistance and learn how to make ourselves available to other people. So if there's anything that human beings have always needed, it is each other. It takes a village to raise a child. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far together, pyramids didn't get built by one person. Some might argue they couldn't have been built without electricity, but we'll get to that at some point, I'm sure. But yeah, human beings need human beings. How do you ask people around you to treat you the way you need without coming across as better than them? That's a good question. A lot of times, so it is the absolute truth that it is up to us to teach the people around us how to treat us. And we can do that in an assertive, reasonable, compassionate, kind way. And the more that we have this balance of kind of, toughness and love, or using the power of love and doing no shit with it, that's how we do it. And if we know that we're being reasonable in what we're asking for, and someone says that we're better than them, I would consider the source. Who's that coming from? And that they're just kind of projecting that onto you. If you're being reasonable and setting a limit with somebody, and they say, oh, who the F do you think you are? Like, that. You just found where their respect for you ends. How you ask that question, you're obviously very careful about making sure that you're not coming off as one up with people, which is like awesome. Like, I wish we had more of y'all around these days. More of us need to be doing this. With that being said, I think that you can be a lot more assertive than you're giving yourself credit for. And I think this other person is taking advantage of you, for what it's worth. If we do decide to divorce, how do we protect the children? Oh, so carefully. However, you shouldn't avoid getting divorced just for the kids. That's some shit. Kids know when you're doing that. And I've worked with a lot of families who have navigated divorce and separation in a really healthy, amicable way, and at the same time with a lot of families who have had abusive, nasty relationships between co-parents, and they have to make really difficult decisions, knowing that the other parent's going to have a lot more access to their kids in private, and that can be really tough, especially when we know the other parent is not playing a straight up game, and it is really important to keep a couple elements in balance as a parent in this position when you're co-parenting with an abusive, manipulative, coercive parent. Is one, to not badmouth them, which is tricky as fuck. Like, it's like, how do I do that with someone who's being a jerk and who's hurting my blood and who I've worked all this time to get away from, and now I have to freaking co-parent with them? Like, it can be infuriating. We have to remind ourselves that if we vent about the co-parent to our kid, then we make our kid our venting companion, and they're not ready for that, and we don't have the relationship for that. Not only are they minor, but they are our blood. They have a biological imperative to be loyal to us and also to the other benefactor of their DNA, which, whether we like it or not, is the co-parent. So if we badmouth that co-parent, as nasty as that co-parent is behaving, if here's judgment out of our mouth towards them, then what they hear is a request to be disloyal to their own DNA, which is a biological imperative, again, as animals, before our humanity. And that creates a degree of trauma and fragmenting for a child beyond what's already been experienced. So the more we can honor, validate, empathize with our kids' experiences, and as they get older and can develop the critical awareness to see more of what's going on, then we can start doing more leveling with them about what the deal is, and they will be coming to us, wanting us to be their consultant and wanting to talk to us about their experiences, because they know that they don't have to protect the other co-parent's name from us, that we won't insist on this loyalty as they see it. Right? So we retain our relationship with them as a trusted confidant rather than a venting companion. And the venting companion option keeps the intergenerational cycle of enmeshment and codependency going to some degree, and stepping back from that in a more individuated boundaries between the subsystems allows everybody to have their own experiences a little bit more, and to own it a bit more, and to stop that cycle of violence and of abuse and manipulation happening. But it's so tricky. I love when you use that word. Oh, Stefanski. Yeah, let's see what else we got. My mom ruined my relationship with my dad for 10 years. Yeah. Oh, parents, family stuff. And it's so, parents having untreated mental illness is really confusing for kids, even if they're not trying to be coercive or manipulative or abusive. Just the parents being in a state of their own untreated mental health stuff, it's going to show hints of delusion or of like not being based in reality, and kids have to reorient their worldview around that, which is incredibly confusing, incredibly disorienting, and it is not okay for kids. And yeah, it is it's abusive, and a lot of times I'll be sitting with those kids, 15 years down the line, going like, hey, how are you getting in these relationships? What's going on here with being so willing to overfunction for folks and walk on eggshells around them? And that's how we learn to do it from growing up in a household where all that was reinforced. Once the children have experienced something disappointing from the other parent, is it okay to explain? Yes, it is okay to explain at a developmentally appropriate level, which is different depending on each kid, chronological age and emotional age. I think my boyfriend may be a narcissist. I'm not sure. He's very defensive when I try to communicate. Regardless of what he has going on mental health-wise, defensiveness ain't never helped nobody. So some of the main ones that I'd want to avoid if you're trying to have interactions with folks are criticizing character traits. So like, you always do this, you never do this, kind of thing, or you're lazy, or try to describe what you don't like more specifically. So avoiding criticizing character traits, avoiding contempt, which is being critical and angry at the same time, and it feels really worn down. Stonewalling, not okay. And defensiveness, right? It just shows an unwillingness and a lack of faith to continue on together. As you're saying, it's not okay. So wherever it's coming from, feel free to let them know that in a TikTok talk tonight, you heard someone say that defensiveness is not fair, and that you would like him to respond to your comments directly, and that you're okay with him taking space if he needs to do that for a specific period of time and a specific location, with the agreement to come back at a predetermined time and location and actually have the conversation. That would be a more grown-up or adult way of doing it. But regardless of where it's coming from, the defensiveness is not a straight-up game. You should not be okay with that. It's not sustainable over time. That will break things down. Amazing therapist told me I didn't need to name emotionally abuse me because I don't need to do it to myself. Wow. How to break that. Trauma recovery work is the different ball. I mean, talking about that more, I'm sure, as we go along. What would you recommend for someone who doesn't have anyone to talk to except for one guy who says he's a friend but is not? I don't know exactly what that means. It sounds like he's kind of saying he's a friend, but he like kind of wants to get in your pants. And he's like not a friend, but he's like kind of there in hopes that you like kind of fall into him. I don't know what it sounds like. I hope I'm not, reading that wrong. How do I train my heart to react like my brain says to? Any help would be appreciated. I like how you said that. How do I train my brain to react, the heart to react like my brain says to? Well, a lot of times they're in disagreement with each other, and that's okay. The heart and the brain, we need both. We need both to be in balance. And it's a matter of helping them sync up together. It sounds like for you, you're pretty avoidant of being close to people, just kind of period. That it doesn't have anyone to talk to. So no other friends. And you said it except for one guy who says he's a friend and who's not, which I'm going to assume that you're a woman who is interested in men romantically, and because you specifically said guy. If you're a male, that I usually don't hear men saying that in that way. They say like one dude, but we don't like talk that much kind of thing. Like, what are we hearing? That doesn't read like that. So he's a friend, but is not. I think you need to go make more friends. And that's really, I think everybody, most people do need to these days, especially as stuff is opening back up and folks have been kind of like lost in electronic digital worlds these days. But human beings need each other, and these days, in many ways, modern society cuts up the community-based strengths of human beings, really how we're naturally tuned to be. So you need a diverse social portfolio. It should be far beyond even if you have just a really significant committed romantic partner. You should have many more friends than this. And that's actually an area that men tend to get into a lot of trouble with personally, is don't maintain a lot of social relationships. And then when do get in a relationship, that relationship becomes the holding space for all the emotional stuff, wherever it happens, and they become over-dependent on that space to help with emotional soothing. It'd be very overwhelming for women in heteronormative relationships, I've found. But as you're talking about, I think you need to just go out there and make a lot more friends and go practice. It sounds like you're kind of avoidant of getting close to people, and I'm sure it's for really good reasons. Maybe consider how folks have burned you in the past and why some of those trust issues might be happening, and how you can honor being the person that your wounded inner child always needed, which sounds like being someone outgoing that's willing to engage with people. It sounds like you're really not accustomed to what that looks like, and I want that for you. You're a human being that should be like that. Is it fair to leave someone who refuses to get therapy to improve the relationship? Yes. Yes, it is. You notice how quickly I answered that? I have no hesitation about that. Mental health is just as important as physical health. And if people aren't willing to do what they need to do to grow with you and better with you and be a human being with you, mentally as well as physically, then, and that's not okay with you and you would like to leave, then leave. That's reasonable. Own that. Grown-ass person for a while. You rock that. You need someone who's willing to grow with you. That's obviously very important to you. And if that needs to happen, you honor that. That's cool. It's not their thing. Well, they'll be able to decide how much that is not their thing, right? Like, how do I keep my anger in check? Man, that's such a good question, Mr. Crocs. It's important to remember that anger is a secondary emotion. Anger is never the first thing that happens. It's very important. You're going to hear me talk about this a good bit, because anger makes us stupid. It's really powerful fuel. Oh, powerful fuel. I got really accustomed to it as a younger kid. I was pissed off at the world and had a lot of shit going on too. And sometimes when I'm in the gym picking up heavy things and listening to Rage Against the Machine or doing it, I'll still tap into it. But for the most part, we got to be careful with anger. A little bit goes a long way. And there are always vulnerable emotions under anger. It's a protective reaction to primary emotional experiences of either fear, shame, or sadness. And your handle is Mr. Crocs, so I'm just going to assume that you're dude. And a lot of times us fellas are taught that in order to be smart, we have to be emotionally restricted, right? We're taught that there's a direct inverse correlation, and that if you openly express pain or fear, this is a sign of your weakness or lack of courage, gameness, or bravery. And with these messages, but we're allowed to be angry, right? And like a little happy, not too happy, or someone's going to call you a homophobic slur, is what it comes down to. And men learn to get very comfortable with their anger and very avoidant of the emotional, of the vulnerable emotions as well. So then you have a situation where we practice being angry over and over again and have avoided the other more vulnerable emotions that are designed to be a part of the whole self-regulation process of all this. And it's really a jacked up combo that tends to happen. So having some anger issues, especially for fellas, is you're not alone. How to manage it? If you're having some anger blow-ups, first, every time you get angry, you should keep a log when that happens, time, date, who you're angry at, what happened. And once a week, sit down and look at what those situations are and try to figure out what was going on under your anger. At the least, you're going to slow down when you get angry and start seeing this stuff happen. And eventually you get like super pissed off, be like, is this worth journaling about? You just slow down and start practicing regulating. And some of it is just practice, like learning how to, and just like being in the gym and get like, it's practice. And then over time, you get to see what is going on underneath of it and learn some nonviolent communication skills. We talk about this a lot here. And if you check out our website, there's a couple of self-guided coaching plans you might want to consider. One is around emotional intelligence. It deals a lot with nonviolent communication and how to do that in a person-centered way that doesn't threaten other people and invites them into your humanity, and some listening skills as well. Or the friendship plan might be helpful for you too. Let's see. Just had a huge anger blowout. Yeah, man. I'm glad that was helpful for you. Man, I get so freaking pumped when I get to share that I'm like a party old stuff with you like that. That really gets me jazzed. It always has, but like it's really fun doing this stuff digitally now, where like it get all this feedback from y'all really quickly about how you're implementing stuff, and it's cool. And just getting to do that with y'all, it's like gives me goosebumps, man. It's so fucking awesome. What would you recommend for someone who doesn't have anyone to... I just read that. Okay, you can't make people love you by giving them more of what they already don't appreciate. Yeah, that was one that went viral a little while ago. This seems to fit the situation I'm in, but it's my daughter and granddaughter. Okay, so this is Grandma. I love it. I get to answer a question for Grandma. We love them with all our heart. I bet you do. My daughter has been through 2 divorces, always comes back home. We've always provided her with emotional and financial support, and my granddaughter has always lived with us. She's 7. 7, that's fun. I have a 5-year-old boy. He's almost 6. He's like barrels of monkeys of fun. Just recently, she has a new boyfriend. She's good at doing that right now. that she's decided to move in with against our advice. She's good at doing that too. And without warning, she takes our granddaughter out of the house to go live with him. Not good for a 7-year-old. My husband and I are having trouble, at least really dramatic and quick for the 7-year-old, not very consistent. My husband and I are having trouble accepting this, and our hearts are broken. I've texted her with no response. That hurts after going out of your way with them for a while. We love them both dearly and worry our granddaughter is missing us terribly because we've raised her from a baby. Please help. Man, that's awful. I'm sorry. I'm a parent too, and I feel super protective and attached to my little people, and I can imagine if God willing, they have little people, that would just be amazing. It's kind of like weird to think about right now. It's 6-year-old and like identical twin girls, but like, okay, if that happens, cool. Now, it sounds like your daughter is prone to a lack of stability in her life, and especially in her romantic life. She does this a good bit. You've seen it already. It's awesome that you're being present for your 7-year-old. She's incredibly lucky to have y'all in her life and being a little bit more consistent. And I know how painful, I can imagine how painful it must be to watch this little person who you've grown so connected to be kind of ripped out of your arms and taken to this other household when you have no way to see what's going on with them, and you're imagining them being freaked out and not having you and stuff. And that's awful. And with that said, it sounds like your daughter is not playing straight up ball. It doesn't sound like it sounds like she does this. So if I were you, I would hang back right now, as hard as it is to do. Send letters if you know where they are. Be around. Be prepared. Don't let this burn your bridge, because that little kid's coming back. This is something that mama does. Not judging mama. Have no idea what's going on with mama. And obviously right now I'm talking to her mama, so I ain't gonna judge your baby. And I hope that you can avoid judging yourself enough as this is happening to not burn that bridge, to protect yourself. It's gotta suck. Yeah, she needs you, so keep doing what you're doing. Oh, appreciate you, Tiffany. Honestly, you make me a little nervous. You sound like a real therapist. You already know. Yeah, I kind of do this. I've been doing this for a while. And I grew up in an abusive household myself. And I've been training to do this since I was like a tiny kid. I was the main, I kind of make myself as bait for the primary abuser in the household. And learn to feel very protective of everybody, and it's still there. It's in what I do as a therapist, as you see. Couldn't fake this. Couldn't fake being as into this as I can like nerd out doing this with y'all for a while. But no, appreciate y'all again sharing the journey with you. I have a question. I've been taking care of my husband and my kids for years, and he has a mental illness, but his mom blames me for everything and wants him to be with someone else but me. What do I do? Can we fire his mom yet? Seriously though, like what? I've been taking care of my husband and my kids for years. He has a mental illness, okay? And if you're choosing, you know he has something going on, and you're over functioning to some degree, and he's struggling, and everyone's a grown-ass adult, and you're doing what you're doing, okay? His mom blames you for everything. That's jacked up. Like you kind of like you tried to step in, because obviously I ain't gonna blame all parenting on mom. That'd be jacked up too. I'd just be another generation of men do that. I ain't gonna do that. It's daddy too, but like, and you try to be raising that man. And with that being said, it's certainly not your job to be getting shade from her. That's jacked up. So we need to fire her. She is projecting her own guilt on herself for enabling him and participating in his whatever he's got that he didn't learn how to regulate and do. And it's got nothing to do with you. I mean, even if it does, you don't need to be hearing it from her. She's not a reliable source for this. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't listen to her. Talk to him about how to set some boundaries with her. See how much he might be able to participate in doing that. It'll be easiest if the boundaries come from him. Obviously, they need to. He's the biological relationship, and so the more that he can set that limit with his own mom, the more it cuts you out. And that is actually probably something that he would benefit doing for his own mental health too. Even if it's hard at the beginning, there are some beliefs that he has about himself and his ability to stand on his own 2 feet and own his voice with his parent. That is participating in where he is stuck with his own mental health, I believe. So this would probably be better for everybody if started doing some of those things. But you have a lot of different options with how you move forward. At the least, fire mom from having any permission to have free rent in your own frickin' home. Forget that. Forget that. You are ignoring me. I don't know who is ignoring you. Where are we sending the questions? You have a moderator. This song isn't about you. Like so send me a DM, send me a question, and I will answer the questions. I don't have a moderator. I'm setting these questions up before. I'll be answering them usually like a week in advance. Sometimes, don't comment, ask questions. Thanks, Tiffany. Should make Tiffany, dude, I should make you a moderator. I should like very politely ask if you would be willing to do that at some point. No pressure at all, or we could just keep using the platform of doing because it seems to be fine. And I appreciate your patience with it, but if you send me a DM, I will answer your question. And I want to make sure we can all learn from it here. We got to stay focused enough, and believe it or not, I know it can like create a lot of output really quickly. I have ADHD. I was like diagnosed when I was 8 years old. They like ripped me out of the principal's office and tossed me into a psychologist's office. And I was like, thank fucking God. Everybody like thank freaking God, and start getting that figured out. And if I'm not sticking to the rhythm that I have, I start like getting lost in what I'm supposed to be doing and spacing out. It starts to not work. So I appreciate your patience with not only my own executive processing stuff that makes everything just a little bit more interesting for at least for me, but as well for hearing the answers to your questions. Reaction sensitivity dysmorphia. Oh yeah. I love that phrase. I torture myself for years, always trying to please people around me, worrying about what they are thinking. Why don't they care like I for them? Exhausting. It sounds like you are describing the thinking errors, the cognitive frameworks that go along with the experience of anxiety. I wouldn't even think about diagnosing you here, and I'm not doing that here. But what you're talking about sounds like racing thoughts, perception of social potential rejection, and social anxiety, and that you find that you're getting stuck in a position of people pleasing and over functioning for people a lot, and that it being too easy for you to get stuck there, and that it's exhausting. Take a step back. Probably take 2 steps back. I don't think anyone is thinking about it as hard as you are. I'm sure you're thinking about it as hard as you are for a reason. And the more that you step back and see how people operate without you people pleasing to maintain that relationship, the more you'll see who actually wants to stay there with you. Which is going to save your energy in the long term, so you're not exhausted. Right? What you're actively participating in a hamster wheel that's making you sick and exhausted, and there are some people inherently that you are able to maintain by over functioning for them, and it's making you crazy. Stop doing that. So not only take 1 step back, take 2 steps back. Let people go away who will. Let's take new assessment of who's around. why we like them, and start doing that more specifically with them, rather than just kind of shooting a shotgun everywhere and hoping that makes people stay around. You're gonna wear yourself out there. I bet you're exhausted. Your freaking shoulder arms freaking drained and everything. Be easy on yourself. People are sending questions. They are. Oh, it's good. It's cool. This is a good question. I'm going to have 2 more questions that I'm going to answer here, and then I'm going to do this periodically. And so keep sending me these questions. I'll keep answering them. Hello, I'm a nurse. In early 2020, I had something happen at work that made me feel guilty. Work, nurse, okay. It sounded like someone died really suddenly, something scary. That was in the middle of crazy health stuff going on all over the place. I know nurses were really pushed to the limit. So if that is some vicarious trauma stuff happening, be real with yourself there. I've worked with a lot of first responders who, a lot of us grew up in abusive households and are used to over-functioning for everybody. And after decades of doing that, it will wear you down. It will catch back up with you. Okay, anyway, I always felt guilty. I've been working on my mental health. I started to meditate sometimes for hours. That's a long time to be meditating in Western culture. I'm curious what you're doing there, if that's meditation. Anyway, it had ketamine infusions for depression. I've taken 5 months off, and I cut ties with toxic family and even friends. I have more focus with family, wife after 2 kids, want to be the best father for them. Touche, brother, love you. Still struggling with guilt, shame, and unworthiness. Not just from work, but things from my childhood. What advice would you give? Okay, especially with the comment about your childhood. Well, first, being a nurse, brother, and thank you. And I love hear dudes being nurses and women being doctors and some of that stuff being flipped around and not having as much pressure to. It's not about the role. It's about what you love doing and being present there for it and serving meaningfully. That's what it's all about. Now, with how you're talking about this, it sounds like what you're talking about is trauma related. Especially when you say, but some things from my childhood, and earlier in the first part of the statement, you were talking about some things happening at work that you still feel guilt for. It sounds like they all got connected somehow. It's cool that you're doing some really different modalities of treatment around the ketamine infusions. That is very new. I'm going to be talking more about using all the research that's coming out about using psychedelics and other psychoactive chemicals in psychotherapy, as well as for treatment, microdosing mushrooms, so on and so forth. So kudos on checking out ketamine infusions. I think you need to go start doing some depth-oriented psychotherapy. You need to start talking to someone. And whatever happened in childhood and whatever happened in those at the hospital, I want you to prepare yourself to consider what you might be stuck bracing for. A lot of times people are expecting, from unresolved trauma, they're expecting to have a lot of anxiety-looking symptoms and intrusive thoughts. That's only 1/2 of a presentation that happens after trauma. After trauma, until it's resolved, we tend to swing back and forth between 2 alternating states. One is intrusive thoughts, the more anxiety-oriented place. And then the other is compartmentalization or numbing, this avoidance symptom. So we can either go into dissociative avoidance or dissociative being stuck in all the thoughts, feelings. And what it sounds like you're describing is being stuck in a more compartmentalized state. There are lots of cool chemicals and ways that you can go about addressing that, but I think it is not all chemical. We're lucky to have you out there serving on our front lines, and I hope you continue taking good care of yourself so you can continue taking care of us. I got time for one more here. Love talking to y'all, and I'm going to do this again periodically. I ain't going anywhere here on this here TikTok. Having fun talking about this stuff with y'all and creating content for you. And I got a book coming out in a couple of weeks and some really cool stuff to share with y'all. So I ain't going nowhere, don't worry. So I love watching your videos. I really appreciate them. Well, thank you. How do you know when it's time to end your marriage, though? We'll get right to it. We have been together 20 years. There is so much to our story. I'm sure there is. After 20 years, a lot of negativity. I'm sure that there's a reason that you're thinking about getting divorced. Obviously, you got together for a reason. You'd stay together for a while. You were together for 20 years. And again, I think something that I mentioned at the beginning of this talk is that just because I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a approved supervisor in this field, like I train licensed marriage and family therapists, I don't have any stock in people staying married. I can't. Without having stock in people being happy and healthy and how to facilitate that through healthy relationships. If you all know that you're not happy and healthy and it's been 20 years, you've had a good run. It sounds like also if it's been 20 years, I'm going to go ahead and assume that you got married somewhere between your 20s and early 30s, that you got half your life ahead of you. You don't have to stop running. And if y'all are able to do that amicably and be friends as much as you need to be and be supportive, at least enough to, if you got kids so they don't have a split loyalty, as we talked about earlier, in order to be with them, then you're doing all you need to be doing. That's what it's all about. So don't put pressure on yourself or obligation to stay in some illegal contractual agreements that isn't serving anybody anymore. I know that might sound weird coming from a marriage and family therapist, but again, I'm in the business of putting myself out of business by helping people be sustainably healthy on their own and with each other. And that's the hokey pokey. That's what it's all about. People are always going to need support doing this. And you deserve to be happy and healthy just like anybody else. So again, I appreciate y'all checking in for these. I appreciate all these questions. I'm going to keep rocking it out. It doesn't sound weird. Good. Well, that doesn't sound weird. Y'all stay healthy out there. Let's finish the week strong. Friday Eve, MFers. Friday Eve. Keep your body healthy. Keep your mind aligned with your purpose and your people. Peace.